Governor Christie. Good morning, Governor. Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Thanks for having me, Hugh. Good morning.
What was your reaction to last night's town hall?
Well, look, I listened to it, and there were two reactions that I had. I mean, the first one was that Donald Trump lives in the past, and doesn't really spend a whole lot of time talking about America's future. And it also struck me that it was almost like deja vu for me, spending 8 years in the New York and Philadelphia media market. If you're a Republican, you're going to get knocked around by the media, and that's the way it goes. And I don't think we do much winning by complaining about it. We just plow through it and talk about our issues and let people hear about our issues. And I don't think he did that very well last night.
The most significant policy position taken last night was his throwdown on the debt limit, meaning it would be mostly psychological if we did not raise the debt limit, and that eventually we're going to have to breach the debt limit unless serious $5 trillion of spending is done. Your reaction to his marker, which I think was intended for the House Republicans more than anyone else.
Well, look, my reaction is, Dr. Hill myself, I mean, he did more to add to that problem during his 4 years as president than any president until Joe Biden. And the two of them both should be thinking about what they've done to add to the absolute fiscal mess that we have here in the country. And so I love, and he said, I love using the debt limit as leverage when I'm not president, but I'm totally opposed to it when I am. Look, he called himself the king of debt when he ran in 2016, and the problem is that we're now seeing the ramifications of that. Enormous inflation that kills the spending power of the American people.
What did you make of the answers on abortion? Because I understood what he was saying. I don't think necessarily Caitlin Collins did, which is it depends. It depends on what the legislation says. How did you think of it?
Well, look, it's much different than what he was saying in 2016 and 2020, and this is the quandary for people who aren't principled on the issue of abortion, Hugh. When Roe versus Wade was there to block anything meaningful from being done at the state level, everybody had, beer muscles talking about this issue. Now that you can do something at the state level, and the federal level for that matter, everyone starts to get a lot more nuanced about it. My view on it is very clear. We for 50 years have said this is a state issue. It's a state issue, should be a state issue for states to decide themselves. I think it continues to be a state issue. And the states that in the first shot at this, the states should have the first shot at deciding what they want abortion to look like. And then once we see what the patchwork in the United States looks like, then we can make a decision about whether the federal government gets involved if they're able.
So is your answer any different? If the Congress passes a national abortion bill, which they have the ability to do under a variety of constitutional authorities, even in a government of limited and enumerated powers. Let's say they get something that's constitutional to your desk. Do you accept the results of the legislative process, or do you veto it and say it's for the states?
Well, I think, Hugh, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think they're going to build a consensus in the Congress to do it. But I would tell you this, what I want first to see is what the states are willing to do. We've been arguing that for 50 years. Let's see what the states are willing to do on this issue. And I just don't believe Congress can't come to a consensus on almost anything. You really think they're coming to a consensus on abortion?
Again, it's an interview, not a debate. Look, I have a different approach. I just ask questions, Governor, so let me ask some more. He said about Ukraine that it was not prudent to call Putin a war criminal. Do you agree with him?
No, I think he's a coward, and I think he's a puppet of Putin. I really do. I don't know why. I say the truth. I can't figure it out, but there's no other conclusion to come to. He wouldn't say last night that Ukraine should win the war. I mean, I was stunned. To me, it was the most stunning moment of the debate. If you won't say that you think Ukraine should win the war, I don't know where you stand with Putin. And to say that he could settle it in 24 hours is the same kind of bravado that we heard 8 years ago when he said that he would build the wall across the entire border of Mexico and the United States, and Mexico would pay for it. And we have a wall that's about a fifth of what we need after his presidency, and Mexico hasn't paid their first peso to us yet.
So when you were listening last night to the exchanges on Carroll v. Trump, you have said on the show before, if you had a client you would not let who was being investigated by 3 different jurisdictions and sued by a couple more, you wouldn't let them on the air. But of course, if you're running for president, you have to go on the air. What did you make of his responses to the questions about Carroll v. Trump?
Well, look, I just don't find them credible. I don't find it credible for him to say he doesn't know the woman. And I mean, I don't find that credible, Hugh. I mean, this guy must be the most unlucky guy in the world. Women who he's never met and he doesn't know continue to accuse him of things. I don't think we need somebody that's unlucky as president of the United States.
If he had showed up in the courtroom and it said, "I own the Grand Central Plaza. I walk into Bergdorf Goodman and somehow we end up in a dressing room," did you find that persuasive in sowing doubt, Christie?
I did not.
All right. Why not?
Well, because I don't find anything he said about this credible. He starts off by saying he doesn't know her. I mean, that's what he says every time to you. I mean, we have to put this in context. Every time there's a problem, he barely knows the person. You remember how many times he said that in his administration about people who work for him.
I'm not sure he knows you anymore, Governor. So
yeah, and I've only known him for 22 years. He barely knows me either. I mean, that's why I didn't find it credible, Hugh. It's where he starts.
What did you think of the audience? The audience was so interesting to me last night. It's just 100%. If you run against him, you got to deal with that audience. What would you say to him about him?
I would just continue to talk about the facts. And I think it's different when someone who's a Republican talks about it than when Caitlin Collins talks about it. I think that's it's significantly different, and I think you'd have to do it continuously, honestly, directly, and you need to confront them. I think what people need to think about is, if you watch that town hall last night and the monologue that it became, where he just continues to talk no matter whether what's going on. That's why he needs to be challenged on the debate stage.
Now, have you made your decision yet? You got another week to go. You told me last week 2 weeks. So you got 1 week to go. When are we going to hear something?
Well, it's about a week.
Okay.
I
don't do math. I'm a lawyer, Governor. I don't do math. So
what? With me, so it might be 2 weeks. Who knows? I'm not going to do that.
All right. The House, a couple other issues. The House Oversight Committee lays this out yesterday. $10 million in LLCs, money flying around from Romania, Ukraine, and China. My goodness, but it stinks to high heaven. What do you think?
Look, I think exactly what you think. I think it stinks to high heaven. And I don't think anybody should doubt this simple fact that at a minimum, Joe Biden's family has been living off Joe Biden's influence for decades. And whether it's Jim Biden or whether it's Hunter Biden and a number of other Bidens that are in the family, they live off of Joe Biden's influence, and he has let them do it, if not encouraged them to do it. And I think it's something that needs to be looked at even more closely, not only by congressional oversight, but also by law enforcement.
The investigation of Hunter Biden's in a couple of different jurisdictions, not Maine Justice. But Maine Justice had a meeting with Hunter Biden's lawyers. I've had a couple of hot takes on that from former prosecutors. What do you make of that, Governor Christie? You are a former United States attorney.
My guess on this one is, because it's in a couple of jurisdictions, that when they got some, usually, when that happens is when they get a phone call. They, meaning defense lawyers, get a phone call saying there's an indictment coming. And they say, well, can we have a meeting to talk to you before there's any indictment? That's my experience of when we would usually have one of those meetings. And maybe Justice is doing it because there's multiple jurisdictions. But I think what probably triggered it is the call saying, your guy's a target. We're getting ready to finish up here. And they say, well, let us have a meeting first. That's my
Yeah.
guess as to what's going on, but we'll see.
I did not discuss this with Governor Christie before he came on, but that is exactly what other former prosecutors have told me. Target letter received or phone call. The lawyers say, "Can we come in and narrow this or discuss it and what the idea, get some idea of what's coming so they can brief their client." That's not unethical. It's not inappropriate. It happens all the time, right, Governor?
In every major case, you send out either a target letter or a phone call saying to the intended defendant, "Hey, this is coming. Do you want to?" Usually, as you know, it's do you want to come in and testify before the grand jury? That answer is almost universally no. But the defense lawyers use it as an opportunity to ask for a meeting and to try to get an idea of what's coming, and sometimes even to negotiate a plea before that.
It did not come up except tangentially last night when Donald Trump brought it up. Hunter Biden's laptop, the 51 intelligence officers or former intelligence officers who signed that. What do you think of that letter now?
I think of it now what I thought of it then, which was it was politics. And I think it was politics then. And I think that what was going on at that time with Hunter Biden, the Hunter Biden laptop issue, whether it was what Twitter did with the New York Post or the 51 people signing the letter, they were against Donald Trump, and they wanted to try to make sure that they suppressed that issue. So I think now exactly what I thought then.
And so when we see an indictment of Hunter Biden, which I think we will see, do you think it's going to be income tax evasion or anything, or conspiracy or minor issues such as misdemeanors for not declaring felonies on a gun application?
My guess is it's the former. I would think it's going to be involving income tax evasion and other issues surrounding that, whether it turns out to be wire or mail fraud or money laundering along with income tax evasion. It'll be some combination of those. Will they also throw in the gun issues? I'm not sure, but that wouldn't typically be what a federal prosecutor would do.
And given what you saw about the Comer thing, very quickly, Governor, do you think Joe Biden is in legal peril?
I think members of his family are, and I think we're going to see whether he will be or not as the evidence develops.
Governor Chris Christie, thank you as always. Very responsive to an early morning request, and I appreciate it.